Hi, Annie here, and today I'm back with a new video about shows that have been canceled too soon, and this is the Matthew Perry edition. And yeah, I know I've talked about some of my favorite canceled shows before, but this is yet another edition. I talk too much when I do those videos, and therefore I needed to split it up more because I had a big long list. And also, like, I feel like a lot of the shows I've really enjoyed have been canceled over the past decade or so. So I'm going to get on with it. And my number one for him is Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip. This is a show I really enjoyed. And I know there was a lot of problems with it. It was Aaron Sorkin that wrote it, and had a lot to do with it. Bradley Whitford had just come off Studio 60. He was playing Matthew Perry on the show, Matt Alby's partner, writing partner, producing partner, that kind of thing. Amanda Peet played a television executive. Sarah Paulson, who just I love and is amazing. She was playing a actress on a sketch comedy type show like SNL. Who was I'm wanting to say Nate Cordry. I want to say Torrance, but I knew that wasn't wrong. That was somebody else that was on there. And Evan Handler, Timothy Busford, Steven Weber, who played Brian off of Wings, was on here. It was D.L. Hughley, who was amazing in it and had some really good storylines on the show. I think, again, this show suffered from a couple different problems. I think, one, it didn't lay great groundwork for itself. Like, as much as I was enthralled, I think the network and the show in itself in some ways let itself down a bit. That, I don't know how to put this really very well, but it did come across as very preachy at places. And I think that really impacted people's ability to kind of connect with it. It also, again, like so many of these people were coming off of huge television series, and Sorkin was just finishing The West Wing. And I think that also played a role. Like, I think that people had a bit of fatigue from this type of show. The network it didn't feel like they were really behind it. It felt like they'd put a lot of money into it and then regretted it. They went ahead and pushed 30 Rock out at the same time, which I think would have been fine if they hadn't have continuously compared them, because they were such different shows. They were both, the only thing they had really in common was that they were both set backstage at a SNL type show. And I think it was just so unfortunate that they kind of, the media and also the network, I think, pitted them against one another, because I think both of them had value and both of them could have stood on their own running at the same time. This one definitely had darker undertones in places and put more of the responsibility for some of the problems like the country was having on television, not just the watching it, but the people making it, wanting so desperately to get those views that they would say anything. And that's actually addressed in the first episode in this like amazing monologue that Judd Hirsch does. And and I think the reason this show struck me so much is this when I first really started getting into television history. Like, I'd liked watching old shows before, but this is when I started actually looking at how the world actually started to change from people watching a certain show and looking at the history of how things got made and the impact they had and how things roll forward. And I was questioning some of the stuff that was happening at the same time, and then in this first episode, it all comes on, it just blows up. Everything that I'd been thinking and more kind of just get locked down, and I was like, okay, so I'm not completely wrong on that score, that this is happening or that's what's going on. And I think it like really solidified certain views of mine, but it wasn't because I saw it on TV, it was because all of a sudden I knew that it wasn't just me thinking it, that there was more of an idea behind that I'd been interpreting what I'd been reading in the history books and different things about film and TV of the past correctly, that it did have this impact, that people even on the other side felt that it had that impact and knew that it could. And I know that most of them would have known anyway to a degree, but this really solidified that. I also was reading a lot at the time on the Mr. Rogers testifying at the, I think it was Senate hearings. Anyway, it was before government officials for the funding for PBS and also kind of television for children and all those things. I'd been reading a lot about him, and I think all of that just kind of had come together in this place in my mind, and it was right at the height of like the worst type of reality TV as well. So I mean, I'm not sure, I haven't really watched reality TV since then, but it was really kind of at that peak and just everything crashing together in my head, and I feel like this solidified it. But on top of that, this had really excellent characters. Like, I think Harriet especially portrayed a religious person that wasn't just a caricature. She was layered, and it was a really excellent portrayal in the sense that it was a character you don't tend to see on television, really, except on certain shows. Like, you don't see that on kind of liberal television shows the same way. And I really liked that you got to see her as a layered person, that she had depth, and that how she interacted with other people. And I know that sounds silly in a way, but it was something I really liked. I also think they handled the drug addiction storyline that they put Matthew Perry through, and that kind of and because I believe it's been a while since I watched, but Bradley Whitford's character, I believe, was also a recovering kind of addict. He'd had problems as well, but he'd been on the straight and narrow for much longer than Matt Albee had. And I just think that, again, they handled it really well, and they showed it as a more complex issue than just like, oh, spoiled rich kid, or, oh, deeply troubled person. And I think they showed that better. And I know, again, that sounds like silly because it is something we see all the time. I just don't think very often it's done very well. It's not integrated in the sense that you can see how people manage to hide it, which this show, I think, managed to do. This show, I feel like, really, it did a lot of things well. And what it did well, I feel like it deserved to have a longer run on the air for that. It also, in a way, predicted its own demise when you look at the storyline of Jordan trying to bring more quality content to the network that she was representing on the show. The fact that that didn't end well for the show itself and the network itself, I think, was like an interesting kind of foreshadowing as they talked about kind of quality television and where it belongs. And this was a decade ago, so, it's just kind of an interesting thing as far as I'm concerned to look at now, but it was really interesting at the time as well. The next TV show I wanted to talk about was, I'm going to go with Mr. Sunshine here, because that was kind of the second show he did after coming off of Friends and after coming off of Studio 60. He had written a pilot in between there, but this was the next show he did, and it was also one that I really liked. I think it suffered a bit from inconsistency in tone from episode to episode, but again, you kept seeing these like real glimmers of real promise, where they not only were doing this kind of more surreal satire type show, but also going really deep with the relationships. When you look at Allison Janney played his boss, who was just like whacked out, just a bit crazy, and also just really out there. But her son comes back into her life, her adult son, who is not quite adult and quite a bit damaged, and doesn't really know how to take care of himself. And the person that Mr. Sunshine played, like Matthew Perry played, kind of ends up having to look after this kid and teach him how to like be an adult and be a person, much to his chagrin, because he is not somebody that you would put in that category if you were somebody that was choosing somebody to help somebody, that would not be who you choose. And I think that the depth that they showed between the mother and son relationship there, and between Matthew Perry's character and the son's character, was really intriguing and interesting. And it showed that, I feel like it showed that the show could have had a longer life, because it did have that kind of depth to the characters. It wasn't just all surface wackiness. There had that heart there that I think makes such a big difference when you're doing those shows, as far as for having longevity, but also for the audience like connecting with those characters. Because I know for me, like, wacky characters are all great and fun, but I don't feel connected to them until there's more things going on and more that I've kind of can feel for them, those beautiful moments of sadness that often kind of bond you to a character. And I feel like that show did that really well when it did it. But I do feel like it it had episodes that were really, really great, episodes that were a bit rockier and felt a bit like they'd been maybe edited together after the fact, or that they just hadn't quite got there on the story yet. And I think that's part of what that show suffered from. It also was matched horribly. It was a, single camera workplace comedy, and it was matched with all multi-camera work or family stuff, I believe was the thing. It was on the wrong network at the time. I think that when that came out, it should have been on NBC in the Thursday night with like The Office and Parks and Rec and those shows, but it ended up on ABC, and it didn't have kind of the right audience to help find it, and just that kind of stuff, like that makes a difference, because just finding it and being in the right mood to watch something from show to show. I feel like it kind of was sad that it didn't end up getting to NBC, where I feel like it would have had a better chance at success. But having said that, the show that is there is really great. It's one that is available from Warner on demand, the archives on demand. I did tape it at the time that it was on, and so I do sometimes go back and watch those episodes. I do want to get the actual official release of it, but it doesn't ship to Canada right now, so I'm hoping to have somebody going over there soon that I can order it to. But that's a show that I think if you like Matthew Perry, I think it's a good one. He doesn't play, like, he's not playing Chandler, and he definitely is playing a more flawed human being, but I feel like it is still a very good representation of him, and he was involved in the writing of it as well. The third show I want to talk about was possibly, I'm going to say my favorite, but also kind of not, because Studio 60 definitely kind of was a real one that really impressed me. But it's Go On, and this one was Matthew Perry was playing somebody that had lost his wife. She'd passed away when she was texting and driving, and he's put in kind of like a grief therapy group that I believe becomes mandated after a kind of anger management issue at work, and or kind of falling apart that way at work. And so he's got to complete this course and get help, and Laura Benanti played the kind of group leader, and there's lots of, again, familiar faces within the kind of group therapy setting that he goes into. And I think what that show did really well was capture some of those kind of moments that you get in grief therapy groups and that kind of group setting, where like you just have one person that's kind of doing their own thing, or like you've got the person that really is like intensely in like distress and pain but doesn't express it at all. I think it really portrayed the kind of variety of people you get in those groups really well. I think it didn't minimize the problems, and it certainly didn't trivialize it, and it also didn't put it in that category where you just can't keep going on, because I mean that literally would be against the name of the show, which is Go On. I really, really liked it. Again, it was one that you'd hit an episode that was like, this doesn't feel like this show, and that was always unfortunate, because it kind of was really easy to lose momentum that way within the kind of context of the story. They were standalone episodes, but kind of the overall arcs went from episode to episode. I do wish that they would have kept them all together more. I feel like the show was at its best when more of the group was together, whether that was just 4 of them, whether that was 8, the whole 8 of them, whatever it was better when they were all kind of in the room together, or being forced to interact, or showing up at somebody's house to try to take care of them when they knew it was a bad day. But that was when the show was at its strongest. And I feel like every time they tried to weed the storylines out too much, it didn't work as well. John Cho played his kind of boss at work, which he was brilliant in it, and kind of would come in and out of this group therapy setting with Matthew Perry as somebody that just was either, because people would show up at the house, or he was trying to drive somebody somewhere, or they were going for dinner, and the worlds kind of collided every so often. And that, again, those episodes were also really good, because it was that kind of collision of like the real world and your therapy world or whatever. I think the show probably was a bit too niche for like network TV. I think it's one that now could probably really happily live a long and healthy life on Netflix or Hulu or those kind of channels, just where the audience isn't expected to be as broad. I think it did what it did really well. I would have liked to see them focus less on a couple. They brought Piper Parablo in for a few episodes, and while I love her, I didn't like that story arc primarily. There was bits of it I liked, but they felt like they spent too much time on it, and I just kept going like, get back to the group, get back to the group. I didn't care to see them interacting. I just wanted him to explain it to the group and explain what was happening. I didn't need to see it, if that makes sense. So that was one that I think it kind of, but I feel again like it was one that would have had that kind of stuff sorted out by season 2. I feel like a lot of the shows, like, they're just finding their feet in season 1 and the things that work and don't work, and it's just kind of a shame when they get cut too short. But I'm very happy that Matthew Perry now and Thomas Lennon have The Odd Couple. You know, I think that that's another one that has looked really good and promising. As much as I miss these other shows having gotten more as much as I wish these other series had gotten more episodes or seasons, I'm glad that right now there is a home for that kind of comedy and that kind of I see a lot of similarities kind of pulled from all places being used in The Odd Couple, so that's always nice. But anyway, I'm going to leave it there because once again, I've been talking on and I could go way further. But I'd love to know what you thought of any of these series that I just mentioned, or if you watched them, or if you liked them, or why you didn't or decided not to tune into them. I'd love to know. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I put out a new video every Wednesday and every weekend as well. So I'd love for you to watch more and not miss a video. Like this video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon. Bye!